This is a CBS News Special Report. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good morning. By dawn's early light in Panama, U.S. soldiers supported by tanks and aircraft are on the attack. The main target, apparently, the Panamanian Defense Barracks, normally Manuel Noriega's headquarters. The action is not over. Casualties are reported heavy. We do not yet have any official count. The fighting has closed the Panama Canal for the first time in 75 years. As for Noriega, we simply don't know where he is, whether he's holed up, slipped the noose, dead, or what. We simply don't know. Kathleen Sullivan and Harry Smith will be along a little later on in the morning. President Bush is to address the nation. We are told that he has been somewhat delayed. What, if any, significance to attach to that, we simply do not know, but the president still plans to address the nation very shortly here this morning, sometime shortly after this 7 o'clock hour in the East. Right now, let's go to David Martin, our Pentagon correspondent. David, what's the general mood and feel there, that this is going extremely well?
No, not extremely well, Dan. I think the word you hear most frequently is pretty well. People say, well, look, we have installed a democratically elected government in Panama, and Manuel Noriega is a fugitive in his own country. Weighed against that is the fact that there are now these reports of casualties. The reports of Panamanian casualties we've heard as high as 50. We don't have a hard number on American casualties. That is the kind of thing we expect to get in about a half an hour in this room, where they are setting up for a briefing by Defense Secretary Cheney and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell.
So that there's no misunderstanding. The president, the intention, as last we heard, was to address the nation for maybe 5 to 7 minutes. His schedule has slipped a bit. Why, we don't know, but we expect him to be addressing the nation fairly shortly here, and then that will be followed by a briefing at the Pentagon, in which, as much as they're going to tell us, up to now virtually nothing, understandably so, about what units are involved and what casualties and so on. That's the schedule.
That's right, and I wouldn't read too much into the delay in President Bush's speech. The fog of war has descended, and I think they're probably having a hard time getting a handle on some facts that they are sure will stand up today, tomorrow, and as we rehash this whole episode in the weeks to come.
Good point, and fair to say, to report that President Bush was up for a good deal of the night getting reports from the scene. We know that he didn't even make an effort to turn in until sometime after 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time, I think. Our CBS News, thank you very much, Dave. We'll be back to you shortly. CBS News White House correspondent Wyatt Andrews is standing by at the White House as we await President Bush's speech. Good morning, Wyatt.
Good morning, Dan. The president, as best we can piece at this point, keeping in mind a dearth of official information here, managed this crisis, this invasion, personally from sometime after 10 o'clock Eastern Time until sometime, as you pointed out, after in the 3:30 to 4 o'clock range, when he quit the Oval Office, went back to the residence, and as he strode by a couple of reporters waiting for him in the hall, said he just wanted to go catch a couple of hours sleep. So I concur with David's conclusion that there is not much to read in the delay between a 7 o'clock speech/report card to the nation and a 7:20 a.m. Eastern Time report card to the nation. It's probably just the case that they want to get all of their facts straight and also want to be complete about what they can report to the American people, given all of the conflicting information that we've heard overnight, especially on casualties, the chance that American hostages or prisoners have been taken, and the uncertainty about Noriega's whereabouts. Dan?
Well, some Americans were waking up this morning and hearing of this really for the first time, or those who went to bed early last night or what have you, and were saying, well, why is the president doing this, and why now?
Well, those are some very key questions, Dan. Remember that twice before in the Bush administration, both after the May elections when Noriega thugs beat up the two or many of the candidates who were elected in that election, and we saw those bloody pictures on television. That was incident number one. And then later in the October attempted coup against Noriega, where he sent U.S. forces to block intersections, provided the president with 2 opportunities to intervene militarily in Panama, which he did not take. At both of those occasions, Mr. Bush defended, at least in part, his hesitation by saying he was reluctant to shed American blood at that particular time, especially in the case of the October coup. He just thought that that was not America's fight. Something over the past weekend, Dan, between Noriega's declaration of a state of war, the killing of the American Marine Saturday night, and also the incident in which a Navy lieutenant was beaten and his wife sexually threatened, convinced this White House that the situation was so unstable that Noriega was capable of anything and that it was time to go in.
And a massive move has been made and is still underway. Thanks, Wyatt.
Thanks.
Juan Vasquez is our correspondent in Panama City. He's on the telephone from there. Good morning again, Juan. What's the situation at the moment?
Good morning, Dan. Within the last few minutes, within the last 5 minutes, we have seen the largest concentration that we've seen so far of U.S. helicopters around the Marriott Hotel. That's where the hostages were taken. 6 or 7 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters swooped down very low at about the level of the 3rd or 4th floor of the Marriott Hotel. They circled around in front of the water, which is about 2 blocks away from the hotel, the beachfront, and they did this for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then they peeled away. Shortly, just a few minutes before that, one of our people was out in the street, across the street, and was stopped by some Panamanian Defense Force people who drove by and just asked him what he was doing. And they told him that the fighting is still continuing, that the fighting is heavy in the city. And that's the first report we've had in the last few hours from Panamanian sources about what's going on. Now, we still don't know the extent of the casualties. We don't know exactly where the firing is going on. We do know that we continue to hear, as we have heard now for the last 7 hours, firing, occasional explosions, sporadic automatic weapons fire. It calmed down for a while. It's calm now, but we're sure it will pick up again. The U.S. Southern Command keeps saying on television that condition echo is in effect, and it is telling all its people except its soldiers, obviously all Americans and all dependents living in Panama City, not to move from their homes.
Juan, I want to try to clear up the... Sorry, Juan, I want to try to clear up the hostage situation which you mentioned. At one point this morning, some 16 hostages have been taken out of that same Marriott Hotel where Juan Vasquez is staying. Now, Juan, it's been widely reported, Associated Press among others, that those 16 hostages have been released. Have they returned to the hotel yet?
As of 15 minutes ago, Dan, they had not returned to the hotel, and the hotel manager told me that he had not heard anything, that as far as he knew, they had not come back. And we should clear up the fact, among those who were missing and among those who we believe were taken as hostages are at least one European citizen, one British citizen. At least there may be more non-Americans who were taken. Dan?
Juan Vasquez, thanks. Tom Fenton, our chief European correspondent, has been monitoring reaction from around the world. Tom, good morning again.
Good morning, Dan. Well, when something like this happens, the United States is immediately hauled into the court of world opinion, and the votes are just starting to come in. They're quite mixed. The Soviet Union, through TASS and the Foreign Ministry spokesman, has condemned the action, said it was a violation of the UN Charter, and has called upon the United States to cease military intervention in Panama. At the other end of the spectrum, you have British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who this morning warmly supported and condoned the military intervention. Now, in between, you have a whole range of nuances. You have the Dutch who sympathize. You have the Japanese who say they're concerned. You have the Spanish who say they lament. And you have Colonel Gaddafi, who not only condemns, but says General Noriega is a revolutionary. There you are, a wide range of opinions, but only Mrs. Thatcher being absolutely favorable.
Thanks, Tom. Now, this is a CBS News special report of the still developing, still fighting situation in Panama. It's a CBS News special report combined with CBS This Morning. As we wait for the at least slightly delayed President Bush to make his speech to the nation, to be followed by a briefing at the Pentagon on what U.S. units are involved, if they're prepared to release that information, and perhaps some information on casualties, all that coming up. We're told unofficially at the White House now that perhaps we can expect the President to make his address at about 20 minutes past the hour. That would be about 10 minutes from now. That still could slip some because, as we pointed out, understandably, the President was up all night. Also, clearly, with this kind of address involving a U.S. military operation, it's not good enough to be almost right. He wants to be absolutely up to date and accurate with the information. So we'll be carrying the President's address live and the Pentagon briefing live later as we go along. But right now, let's go to Kathleen Sullivan and Harry Smith, who've been following this situation as it develops. Kathleen and Harry, good morning.
Good morning. All this morning here on CBS This Morning, we are going to bring you the latest on the U.S. troops now in combat in Panama. We have watched it all throughout the night, and joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Connecticut Senator Christopher Dodd, the chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Western Hemispheric Affairs. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Kathleen.
Is this legal?
Well, it would apparently be so. I think at this moment, when I gathered, I've talked to several of my colleagues in both the House and the Senate, and I think there's generally support at this hour for the President's action. Obviously, time as it rolls on during the day, you may have different opinions emerge, but at this hour, I think people are basically supportive of what the President's doing.
Support? There are no questions of legality whatsoever that you've heard from any?
But fairly shortly, we're told by a briefing at the Pentagon. The fighting continues in Panama. General Noriega's whereabouts are unknown. The mission, the U.S. military attack, what the Panamanians call the invasion of their country, that is Noriega's faction of the Panamanians calls the invasion of the country, continues. It has a number of missions. First and foremost was to find Noriega and, if possible, bring him back alive. That is, bring him back to the United States to face the criminal drug charge indictment that was handed down by a grand jury in Miami. But there were other goals of the mission: to install a democratically elected government, to bring stability to the country, to protect American citizens. All of those are reasons that have already been given by the White House in its official statements as to why this military action has been undertaken. We go now live as part of our CBS News special coverage and part of our CBS This Morning coverage to the President of the United States addressing the nation on the action in Panama from the Oval Office.
All right, 2030. 30 seconds.
My fellow citizens, last night I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama. No president takes such action lightly. This morning, I want to tell you what I did and why I did it. For nearly 2 years, the United States, the nations of Latin America and the Caribbean, have worked together to resolve the crisis in Panama. The goals of the United States have been to safeguard the lives of Americans, to defend democracy in Panama, to combat drug trafficking, and to protect the integrity of the Panama Canal Treaty. Many attempts have been made to resolve this crisis through diplomacy and negotiations. All were rejected by the dictator of Panama, General Manuel Noriega, an indicted drug trafficker. Last Friday, Noriega declared his military dictatorship to be in a state of war with the United States and publicly threatened the lives of Americans in Panama. The very next day, forces under his command shot and killed an unarmed American serviceman, wounded another, arrested and brutally beat a third American serviceman, and then brutally interrogated his wife, threatening her with sexual abuse. That was enough. General Noriega's reckless threats and attacks upon Americans in Panama created an imminent danger to the 35,000 American citizens in Panama. As president, I have no higher obligation than to safeguard the lives of American citizens. And that is why I directed our armed forces to protect the lives of American citizens in Panama and to bring General Noriega to justice in the United States. I contacted the bipartisan leadership of Congress last night and informed them of this decision. And after taking this action, I also talked with leaders in Latin America, the Caribbean, and those of other U.S. allies. At this moment, U.S. forces, including forces deployed from the United States last night, are engaged in action in Panama. The United States intends to withdraw the forces newly deployed to Panama as quickly as possible. Our forces have conducted themselves courageously and selflessly, and as Commander-in-Chief, I salute every one of them and thank them on behalf of our country. Tragically, some Americans have lost their lives, in defense of their fellow citizens, in defense of democracy. And my heart goes out to their families. We also regret and mourn the loss of innocent Panamanians. The brave Panamanians elected by the people of Panama in the elections last May, President Guillermo Endara and Vice Presidents Calderon and Ford, have assumed the rightful leadership of their country. You remember those horrible pictures of newly elected Vice President Ford, covered head to toe with blood, beaten mercilessly by so-called dignity battalions. Well, the United States today recognizes the democratically elected government of President Endara. I will send our ambassador back to Panama immediately. Key military objectives have been achieved. Most organized resistance has been eliminated, but the operation is not over yet. General Noriega is in hiding, and nevertheless, yesterday, a dictator ruled Panama, and today, constitutionally elected leaders govern. I have today directed the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of State to lift the economic sanctions with respect to the democratically elected government of Panama, and in cooperation with that government, to take steps to effect an orderly unblocking of Panamanian government assets in the United States. I am fully committed to implement the Panama Canal Treaties and turn over the canal to Panama in the year 2000. The actions we have taken and the cooperation of a new democratic government in Panama will permit us to honor these commitments. As soon as the new government recommends a qualified candidate, Panamanian, to be administrator of the canal as called for in the treaties, I will submit this nominee to the Senate for expedited consideration. I am committed to strengthening our relationship with the democratic nations in this hemisphere. I will continue to seek solutions to the problems of this region through dialogue and multilateral diplomacy. I took this action only after reaching the conclusion that every other avenue was closed and the lives of American citizens were in grave danger. I hope that the people of Panama will put this dark chapter of dictatorship behind them and move forward together as citizens of a democratic Panama with this government that they themselves have elected. The United States is eager to work with the Panamanian people in partnership and friendship to rebuild their economy. The Panamanian people want democracy, peace, and the chance for a better life in dignity and freedom. The people of the United States seek only to support them in pursuit of these noble goals. Thank you very much.
Live and direct from the Oval Office at the White House, the President of the United States, a somewhat husky-voiced George Bush. And why would the President be? He was up most of last night and is talking to the nation about one of the most important things any president can talk to the people of the country about, and that is military action. The U.S. military action continuing in Panama. The President underscoring that he thinks in many ways the operation has already been a success. It's established what he called a democratically elected government. However, man on the run, Manuel Noriega, is in hiding, the President says, which means that he has thus far escaped the action which was primarily directed at him, but the U.S. military operation continues in Panama at this hour. Wyatt Andrews is standing by at the White House. Wyatt?
Dan, some of the key points that we learned from the President's address, followed by some of the things we didn't learn. We learned that there has been American and innocent Panamanian loss of life. The President did not put a specific figure on this, but he took a moment in his speech to salute those mothers and families who have lost Americans in this fighting, the first casualties of the Bush administration, at least from a military point of view. As you pointed out, the president stressed that he thought the key objectives of this invasion had already been achieved, chiefly that the democratically elected president and vice presidential candidates had been installed by the United States government, now recognized by the United States government, and in effect with the U.S. military now occupying Panama City and having driven Noriega into to power, you've got a situation where that government will begin to function, at least I'm drawing that inference from the president's speech, with the power of U.S. forces on the streets of Panama City to back all of that up. Now the key questions, Dan, how long will it take them to find Noriega? And also, what about American hostages? One of the things the president did not mention, in addition to not giving us a casualty figure, was what is the situation with the hostages and how is he confronting that? One of the advantages from the president's point of view to an Oval Office speech is that he gets to explain his rationale to the American people for what he has done in a very dramatic situation, but reporters were not in there to question him on some of the specifics that speech lacked. Dan?
Wyatt, any way you cut it, Noriega is still loose. Has anybody there suggested the possibility that Noriega has escaped the country? We know, for example, that he has this kind of souped-up French helicopter, kind of a Corvette of helicopters. Anybody suggested he may have escaped the whole country?
The presumption here, Dan, as we've heard through reports throughout the night, is that Noriega has an ego trip, I want to say, or at least a fascination or a confidence, if you will, that he can command certain elements of the Panamanian Defense Force and resist this. So the presumption here now, even though, again, the president did not enlighten us one way or the other on where Noriega might be hiding, is that Noriega is hiding in Panama and attempting to be in command of forces loyal to him.
Vice President Quayle was mentioned earlier as being part of the tight circle helping to direct this operation under President Bush. Is he in the White House now, Vice President Quayle, and is he still helping to direct the operation?
Dan, I'm not exactly sure where the vice president is. I know he was at the White House last night while the president was attending one of his 8 or 9 Christmas parties that he's throwing during this holiday season. On the other hand, since we reported that, it's become quite clear that the president himself managed this from his study in the Oval Office, and he did so pretty much from the time of that Christmas party till right about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Thanks, Wyatt Andrews. Juan Vasquez is in Panama City, as he has been throughout this operation. Juan, good morning again. And what's the situation there now, as best you can tell it?
Well, good morning, Dan. Some good news for a change. We know that some of the Americans who were taken hostages at the Marriott Hotel about 6 hours ago have now returned to the hotel. We are trying to find out from them exactly what happened. We are trying to find out if all of them were released. But we saw a group of 5 come into the hotel just minutes ago. So we're trying to get some more details on what happened. We're trying to find out whether anyone is still detained and, of course, where they've been, what they were told, and how they were treated. We don't know. The other new development is that Guillermo Endara, the president who was installed either early this morning or last night as the new president of Panama, has gone on the radio saying, informing Panamanian citizens that he is the president. We will have more details on that later. But that is a recent development. That's President Endara apparently has been able to get control of some of the radio stations and to be able to announce that.
Thanks, Juan. American forces attacked during the night. They surrounded the barracks of the Panamanian Defense Forces, hoping that Manuel Noriega might be in there. If he is, he's not yet been found. Unofficial reports of at least 50 people killed. No details other than that on the casualties. The Panama Canal has been closed for the first time in its 75-year history, apparently closed as a precaution by the United States. David Martin, our Pentagon correspondent, is standing by at the Department of Defense. Good morning, David. You heard what the president said. The next voices, official voices we'll hear, will be those at the Pentagon.
That's right, and we expect to hear those voices in about 10 minutes. They were going to let 15 minutes elapse between the end of the president's speech and the time that Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney and General Colin Powell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, come into this room to give us, hopefully, more concrete detail on the operation. The president said that the key military objectives have been achieved, but we don't yet know what those military objectives were. He also said that most resistance has been put down, but most can cover a multitude of sins. We don't know how much resistance is still ongoing. He said, tragically, some Americans have lost their lives. We don't know how many Americans have lost their lives. Perhaps we'll get a number to go with that fact here when the briefing begins. It seemed to me from the president's speech that he was trying to sort of declare victory without saying that the job is over, by saying that we have recognized the new government, we're sending our ambassador back immediately, and we're going to lift the economic sanctions, as if the fact that Noriega was still at large was just sort of a minor detail that would get cleaned up sooner or later.
Thank you, David. And we emphasize to our viewers and listeners that we will be covering live that Pentagon briefing, which, as David pointed out, we now expect to take place in about 10 minutes. If there's going to be any official information on what U.S. military units are involved in this still underway attack by U.S. forces in Panama, it will come out of that Pentagon briefing in about 10 minutes. And also, if there's any further information on casualties, President Bush has already confirmed that there have been some U.S. casualties. He spoke movingly and directly to the subject that this kind of operation costs lives, and he saluted those Americans involved in the operation and took a moment of a special salute to those families who will be receiving that dreaded knock on the door as the day goes along. Juan Vasquez now reports from Panama City that all of those people taken from the Marriott Hotel, 16 people total, most of them Americans, earlier in the morning, all of them have now been set free. With us again now is Senator Christopher Dodd of Connecticut, perhaps the most knowledgeable man in the Senate about Central American affairs. Thank you for being with us, Senator Dodd. Let's talk for a moment about the ramifications, if any, of what's happening in Panama now in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Cuba.
Well, I think first of all, I think it's very important at this hour that without knowing more, that the Congress and the American people, as I'm sure they'll do, will support the President's decision here. We'll have plenty of time to analyze the specifics of this as the day rolls on and into the coming days in the aftermath. But at this moment here, I think it's important to be supportive. A very pivotal question, and the President alluded to this, and I agree with him. He had really gone the extra mile politically. He had gone to the OAS, spoken to individual presidents throughout the hemisphere. This is something an American president had not done in an awful long time in dealing with a problem that we faced in the hemisphere. So I commend him for that. The question now will be how many of those presidents, what the OAS position will be with regard to this action. If it's a success, then I think they'll probably be generally supportive or at least quiet. If it's a failure and it goes on for days, we end up fighting with the PDF for days on end, then I would expect we'd face some real problems politically in the hemisphere.
But again, the reverberations, was a message intended here on the basis of what you know to be heard loud and clear in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Cuba, or that's not so much related?
I wouldn't extend that, no. I think clearly he had 35,000 Americans in Panama. That's not the case in any of these other countries. You've got the Panama Canal, which is of extreme and vital importance, not just to the United States, but to the Western Alliance. That is not the case in any of the other nations you've mentioned. Those two facts alone would create a different situation in Panama than either El Salvador, Nicaragua, or certainly Cuba.
Any indication what Mexico's reaction will be? Traditionally, the Mexicans take a very dim view of any American military involvement in the region.
Well, I think it's important. Up to this point, they've been quiet on it, and I think that's a positive response. In the past, you might have had a condemnation even before it began. So I see that out of the Salinas government as a positive development. But again, I emphasize, like anything else, victory will have 1,000 fathers. If this doesn't work out well, there'll be more critics than you can imagine. And Mexico, I would assume, would be one of those if it's a failure.
Senator Christopher Dodd, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
The fighting continues in Panama. The United States has suffered casualties. How many, we do not know. The extent of casualties overall in this fighting, Panamanian as well as U.S. military personnel and perhaps U.S. civilians, simply unknown. We are awaiting now, in the wake of President Bush's address to the nation, a Department of Defense briefing. While we await that, we'll call in our New CBS News consultant, General Fred Warner, recently retired as the man in charge of the U.S. military in the Southern Command. General, good morning again. We've heard what the President said, the President accentuating the positive as one would expect. General Noriega still at large. Again, put a frame around this for us.
Yes, the President's speech is what we would expect of him at this time, and most appropriate to put a most positive picture on it, and in that positive attitude to try to solicit the cooperation of the Panamanian Defense Forces in bringing about the capture of General Noriega. We do not have any new tactical details at this moment that enable us to enlarge on the picture, except that we can presume that we're now in that slow doldrums of an operation that go on between the initial bang and then the final results. I think we'll have to wait a few more hours before the picture clarifies further.
I was reminded of that old soldier saying that war is hours of boredom punctuated by a few seconds of terror. General, the operation as it's unfolding now, this looks to you the beginnings of at least a short-term occupation of the country, or that too strong and too early to say?
Yes, I think it's probably too strong a term because when we use it, occupation, we of course think back to our most recent experience in post-World War II with full-fledged civil military governments and the takeovers of the full administration and bureaucratic responsibilities of the country. I don't think we're anywhere close to anticipating that, although the operation may be extended some days beyond that which had been hoped for.
General Fred Warner, our consultant and analyst. We'll be back to you as the morning goes along. In Washington, CBS News correspondent Rita Braver, who followed the Noriega drug connection for a number of years, is with us this morning. Rita, good morning.
Good morning, Dan.
I think a lot of people, certainly I am, remain somewhat confused about what Noriega, a man deeply involved in drugs, was doing on our United States of America CIA payroll. Try to sort some of this out and give us some perspective on that.
Well, it's very interesting, and I think it shows changing politics more than perhaps any other case we've had in recent times. There was a time in this country, Dan, and it's not very long ago, that even the leaders of this nation sort of thought, well, drug dealing is less important perhaps than fighting communism. And therefore, Noriega was used as an informant against Castro, and also, according to several former Panamanian officials who we think are reliable, supposedly Oliver North used him to help train Contra guerrillas. And that is what was going on, and it is believed that the administration basically looked the other way, even though there were these incredible reports that Noriega had not only been shielding drug dealers, had been allowing the country to be used as a transshipment point for drugs, but also had been allowing massive drug money laundering in the country. One of the people who he allegedly shielded, Pablo Escobar, a key leader of the Medellin cartel, who the U.S. now would like very much to get its hands on.
Rita, you mentioned Oliver North. We not only want to be accurate and complete in our coverage, we'd also like to be fair. Was it ever established that Oliver North met with General Noriega? And there was also a report that Admiral at the time, Poindexter, may also have met him. Was that ever established?
Again, that's not something that we really ever heard about from their point of view. We have second sources, people who said that they saw Noriega with Oliver North. We had Jose Blandon, a former UN official for the Panamanian government, say that he was aware and in fact saw North meeting on a ship with Noriega. North has never really commented to us on whether or not he was involved in that in the past, to my knowledge. The other thing that I keep remembering is what an issue this was with George Bush himself. You remember that famous 1983 photograph of George Bush sitting on a couch with Noriega at a time when there was lots of intelligence that Noriega was dealing drug trafficking. Later, I believe Bush was told, or several people have said that George Bush was told about this, had to know about it because he was the man who, as vice president, was at that time the drug czar of the United States. And a lot of people had trouble believing that Bush, who has said all along that he never knew that Noriega was involved in drug trafficking, didn't really know about it.
In fairness, that then Vice President Bush and those who spoke for him emphasized that from their point of view, the Vice President was doing his job, going down and meeting, getting a feeling for Central American leaders.
That's right, and I think at the time, even Craig Fuller, who was then the Chief of Staff to the Vice President, acknowledged that drug trafficking had been discussed at that meeting, but he said that at that time Bush had no knowledge that Noriega was ever involved in drug trafficking. Again, it just shows, I think, how politics changes and changes the way world leaders are viewed by governments.
What a complicated situation. Thank you, Rita Braver. A very complicated situation. We don't have time to get into the continued reports and considerable evidence and testimony that Noriega was involved with Fidel Castro in intelligence operations and also allegedly, supposedly, reportedly in drugs. We go again now to Juan Vasquez, our CBS News correspondent who is in Panama City for an update on the hostage situation. Juan?
Dan, at the moment, the husband of one of the women who was taken hostage is telling us that all of the hostages have been released, and he knows this for a fact. However, none of the hostages have shown up here at the hotel. The group that came in earlier was another group that had not been taken hostage. The husband, who does not want to be identified at this time, says that he has been told that the hostages were taken in two groups, and they were separately released hours later on the streets of Panama City. But as I say, we still have not seen those hostages in the hotel. It was erroneously reported earlier that they had actually, some of them, come back to the hotel. But we believe that they have all been released. Dan?
Thank you, Juan. So far as we know, the whereabouts of Manuel Noriega have not been established. This in from United Press International. Maritime sources in Denmark report this morning that the Panama Canal has been declared a war zone and was closed. Now, we've been told before the canal had been closed as a precaution by the U.S. Who operates the canal. For the first time in the canal's 75-year history, these Denmark sources now say that the canal has been declared a war zone, at least temporarily, and these Denmark maritime sources say that Noriega's Panamanian Defense Forces claim in a radio broadcast to now be holding 41 Americans. That has not yet been confirmed. David Martin is at the Pentagon, where the briefing is about to begin. David?
Dan, we're expecting the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here momentarily. We've been given a 2-minute warning, and in a minute or so they should be here. General Colin Powell, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, is somewhat of a forced expert on Panama now because he took office on October 1st, and that abortive coup against Noriega was on October 3rd. So virtually the first official duty that General Powell had to undertake was managing the military end of that coup. As a matter of fact, he had to do it even before his official swearing in. So he's probably come to know more about Panama than he certainly ever expected to and maybe ever wanted to. Secretary Cheney has been through a couple of these with the president, most notably, I think, last summer with the murder of Marine Lieutenant Colonel Rich Higgins and the possibility that the U.S. might retaliate if the terrorists in Lebanon killed any more hostages. Here comes the Secretary now and General Powell.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Secretary Cheney has a brief statement for you this morning. Then he will turn it over to General Powell, and then they will both be here to answer your questions. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Pete. I think all of you have seen the President's statement explaining the action that he ordered and explaining the background and the rationale for it. Obviously, we've tried for more than 2 years to resolve by peaceful means the difficult relationship that had developed with the government of Panama. This past week, it came to a head with the declaration of Manuel Noriega as a maximum leader and his statement that a state of war existed between Panama and the United States. That was, of course, followed by the shooting death of an unarmed American off-duty Marine officer on Saturday and the brutal treatment of other U.S. military personnel and dependents. On Sunday, the President made the decision to order U.S. forces to Panama, specifically, as he indicated earlier, with the mission of protecting American lives, of protecting American interest in connection with our responsibilities under the Panama Canal Treaty, with the effort being made also to restore democracy and to bring General Noriega to justice should we capture him. The order went out late on Sunday to implement a plan that had been in existence for some time. It was one of the first items I was briefed on when I became Secretary of Defense last spring. The plan was developed to deal with various contingencies that might arise in Panama. We have always been concerned for several months now by virtue of the fact that there are large numbers of Americans in Panama, not only those that are there because they've been assigned there because of their military role and responsibilities, but also American civilians who live in the area. The operation is continuing at this time. Some of the reporting we have, obviously, is still fragmentary. It's our intention this morning in this briefing to give you as much information as we reasonably can, given the fact that the operation continues. At this point, of course, General Noriega is still at large. He is no longer the maximum leader in Panama. A democratic government has been reestablished with the duly elected officials selected by the people of Panama last May. He is, at this point, a fugitive. As Secretary, I want to thank all of those individuals who participated in the operation. It has been carried out in an extremely professional manner. I think they have performed superbly in carrying out their duties and their responsibilities. And at this point, I'd like to turn the briefing over to Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me add my own caution that the operation is only 7 hours old and is still ongoing and may be continuing for some time to come. So we're going to give you as much as we possibly can, but please understand that there will be details that I cannot get into for purposes of operational security. As you know, at the direction of the President, United States Armed Forces undertook operations in combat in Panama just prior to 0100 hours this morning, or roughly just before 1 a.m. this morning. The participating units include in-place forces in Panama, the 193rd Infantry Brigade, which in recent months had been reinforced by Marine units, by a battalion from the 7th Infantry Division at Fort Ord, California, by a mechanized battalion from the 5th Infantry Division at Fort Polk, Louisiana, as well as additional supporting forces to include military police. In the course of the evening, additional forces have been added, and I'll describe how they have been added. Those additional forces include a brigade of the 82nd Airborne Division, 2 Ranger battalions, selected special operating units. All of this, of course, was supported superbly by the United States Air Force and the United States Navy, and there are additional reinforcing units that will assist in stability operations coming from the 7th Infantry Division at Fort Ord, California, as well as from the 16th MP Brigade at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. As you know, our purpose, as was stated by the President, to protect Americans, to protect the integrity of our treaty, to restore democracy in Panama, and to bring to justice the fugitive Mr. Noriega. We conducted operations this morning beginning just before 1 a.m. in 3 general areas that General Kelly will point out on the map. First, in the central Panama Canal Zone area, to the east of that near the International Airfield, and to the west down by Rio Hatta. Let me now turn to the larger map and discuss each one of these pieces in turn. Let's start up on the Atlantic Caribbean side with Task Force Atlantic. Task Force Atlantic consisted of a battalion from the 7th Infantry Division and a battalion from the 82nd Airborne Division, which was in the Jungle Operations Training Center in Panama. Their mission was to secure several critical sites in the southern portion of Task Force Atlantic AO, the prison at Gamboa, which was secured in the course of the morning, and within which there are some PDF personnel who had been put in jail as a result of the coup attempt earlier in the fall, and we now have some 47, 48 very happy prisoners who have been released. The electrical distribution station at Cerro Tigre is now secure, and Madden Dam, a critical facility, is also secure. Other elements of Task Force Atlantic also ensured the security of our installations in the Cologne area, and they neutralized the 8th Infantry Company of the PDF, which did not take too active a role in this operation, as well as neutralizing the naval infantry unit located up toward the north. There is still some sporadic firing up there. The situation isn't completely resolved, but for the most part, Task Force Atlantic has completed its assigned missions. Let me turn now to Task Force Semper Fidelis, which is essentially a Marine rifle company and a light armored infantry company, Marine, as well as some additional MPs assigned to Task Force Semper Fidelis. Their principal mission was to secure the Bridge of the Americas, ensure the security of Howard Air Force Base and environs around Howard Air Force Base. Task Force Semper Fi has completed their mission successfully. Let me turn now to Task Force Red, which is off to the west down by Rio Hatta. For those of you who were here on the 3rd of October, you'll recall that that was a location from which the 7th Company launched their operation to come to the assistance of General Noriega during the coup attempt in October. Because of the criticality of that facility, as well as 2 companies located there, a Ranger battalion parachute assaulted onto that location at H hour, just about 1 o'clock. All of the things I'm describing so far all took place simultaneously about H hour, 1 a.m. in the morning. In the course of their activities there, they succeeded in neutralizing Rio Hatta. It is under our control. Some of the members of the 6th and 7th Company have dispersed away from Rio Hatta, but we also took a number of prisoners, so it is neutralized, and Task Force Red has accomplished its mission and is sweeping up in the area. If I can now turn into the Task Force Bayonet area in the central section, the narrowest zone there. Task Force Bayonet consisted of a mechanized battalion, the force of the 6th Mechanized. It also was supported by a platoon of light tanks, as well as the 5th Battalion of the 87th Infantry. And the mission of Task Force Bayonet was twofold, really, to provide security for our major facilities in the Task Force Bayonet area of operations. And the principal combat mission performed by the Mechanized Battalion was to seize the commandancia, the headquarters of the PDF, General Noriega's headquarters, and that was also done beginning at about 1 o'clock in the morning. They have accomplished that mission. The headquarters has been reduced. There's been considerable burning. I'm not quite sure how much of it has been burned out, but there has been quite a bit of fire down there. But they, for the most part, have accomplished their mission. There is sporadic firing that continues in the area, and some of the PDF members who were in the commandancia have now slipped out and are mixing in with the general population, and so there will still be a need for mopping up and stability operations in support of the new government. The forces that were opposing them in the vicinity of the commandancia are shown under the commandancia listing: 1st Public Order Company, 2nd Public Order Company, and elements of the 6th and 7th Infantry, which I mentioned were out at Rio Hatta. Let me also mention that as part of Task Force Bayonet, another unit was flown across the entrance of the canal in order to block the 5th Infantry Company, which is at Fort Amador. And at the moment, there is continuing work down there to completely neutralize the 5th Infantry Company. But for the most part, Task Force Bayonet has accomplished its mission and is undertaking stability and sweep-up operations. Let me turn now to the east to Task Force Red. Task Force Red consisted of another Ranger battalion which parachute assaulted in at H hour. Their mission was to take over the international airfield, get it ready for follow-on forces coming from the 82nd Airborne, and begin to block access for Battalion 2000, which, as you know, also played an instrumental role in the events of 3 October. The Rangers landed on the ground, quickly seized the airport, began to put out patrols to the east. They were assisted, and I might add that throughout the area of operations, the Special Forces Group elements belonging to Southern Command have been performing reconnaissance and surveillance, and some of those reconnaissance and surveillance efforts got out to the Cora River Bridge early and blocked that. There was some fighting out there, but no main elements of PDF units came down the road in the direction of the city. And the Rangers are now out in that location as well. Beginning 55 minutes after H hour, or about 1:55 this morning, The first element of the 82nd Airborne Division Ready Brigade arrived, 10 C-141s, and they conducted a parachute assault onto the international airfield in that vicinity. 10 C-141s arrived several hours later, and at 0515, the second half of the 82nd Airborne Division parachuted in. And their mission is sort of depicted by the arrows. They will move 1 arrow going out to make sure Battalion 2000 stays where it is, 2 other arrows coming back into the direction of the city to assist with stability operations and make sure the 1st Infantry Company and the Cavalry Squadron you see depicted remain neutralized. In order to continue our stability operations and make sure we really accomplish our mission of protecting Americans and assisting the newly inaugurated government, additional forces are being brought down from Fort Ord, California, 7th Infantry Division of Brigade, and as I mentioned earlier, the 16th MP Brigade will be sending additional elements down. In the process of these operations, we also took special actions to immobilize the PDF Navy. They have a small fleet of boats which were immobilized, and we also took actions to immobilize aircraft that could have been used for escape purposes. All of these actions that I have mentioned were marvelously supported by Air Force and Army gunships, magnificent support from the Military Airlift Command, Tactical Air Command, and refueling tankers from the Strategic Air Command, Special Operations units, as well as Special Forces, reconnaissance, and surveillance units. Let me mention a few specific events that I know are of interest to you. There are reports of hostages. We are chasing these reports. In some cases, hostages were taken and then released. And I don't want to go into any numbers or details because this is an ongoing operation, except to let you know that we are looking into every one of these, and we believe we have adequate resources in the area to deal with that situation. With respect to General Noriega, as you know, we're only 7 hours into this operation. We have not yet located the general. He has a habit of changing locations in normal times 4 or 5 times a night, but we will continue our efforts to locate him. But as a practical matter, we have decapitated him from the dictatorship of this country, and he is now a fugitive and will be treated as such. With respect to the embassy, the American embassy did take some fire in the course of the evening. Nobody was injured. There was some minor damage to the embassy, and we have U.S. forces in strength at the embassy to secure it. As you know, there is a new government in place, and I will talk briefly about the casualty figures. As you know, this is preliminary, and I want to reemphasize that the numbers I'm about to give you are preliminary and are subject to change as we move in the course of the morning and get better information. At the moment, the figures I have from Southern Command provide the information that 9 Americans were killed in action, 39 Americans were wounded in action, 1 American is missing. Several aircraft were damaged, to include several C-130s and some helicopters, and I have no information that I'm comfortable with on PDF casualties to provide at this time. That concludes my briefing.
General Powell, do you see the need to send further reinforcements, or are we seeing all of the forces that are going to be necessary?
The forces I mentioned that are being sent in now for reinforcement, the 7th Division and the MPs, I think that'll do it. That'll bring it up to around 24,000, and that's really not for sustained combat, but for stability operations to make sure we are truly controlling the situation.
4,000 sent in, or that
No,
counts?
that's total, including those that were there to begin with.
Does that include the ones that are in now, General Powell?
Yes,
the ones
total.
that will be in?
That includes all of all that we are planning, including those that are in the reinforcement package coming in. And that is as you know, a number that can float around as we adjust our plans in the course of the day.
Excuse me, how many have been sent in so far?
One at a time, please.
How many have been sent in so far?
There were 13,000 to begin with.
Who were already there.
Who were already there as part of Southern Command assets before the operation began overnight. And so far we have introduced close to another 7,000. and we have roughly 2,500, I believe, on the way from the 7th Division and the 16th MP Brigade.
What about members of the 82nd Airborne and some of the Army Rangers who were brought in? I know you say you want to get them out as quickly as possible. When can we expect that they'll be sent home?
Well, the primary mission right now is to make sure the situation is under control and we have satisfied our objectives. And then as soon as that is as we would like it to be and we're sure that things are settled down, we will start to retrograde those soldiers as quickly as possible, but I don't have a specific timeline yet.
General Powell,
Yes,
did you have any evidence that Noriega was about to threaten the operations of the canal?
I've heard those reports. He has been saying this for years and years, so those reports would not surprise me. But I don't know that I want to get into specific reports. Nothing that came to my attention that caused me great concern. We had deployed our forces in a way that provided, I believe, adequate protection of the canal.
Powell, can you tell us where President Ndara was sworn in? Who did it? I mean, tell us a little bit about that scenario. Okay?
He was sworn in shortly before the operation. I don't have the details, and I think I'd better I need to refer you to the State Department for those kinds of answers. It was a Panamanian. He was sworn in by a Panamanian justice or of some kind, and it was done an hour before, but with respect to yes, but I really need to refer you to the State Department because it was handled by the State Department.
General Powell, what assurances do you have that Noriega isn't going to escape into the countryside and organize some kind of guerrilla operations to keep harassing the U.S. forces down there?
Oh, he can do that, and we will chase him and we'll find him.
Do you know that he's still in the country?
No, I don't know that. He is a very canny individual. He's demonstrated incredible ability to survive catastrophe, and we'll see over time whether he survives this catastrophe.
Wouldn't he make life miserable for the U.S. forces down there?
I doubt it. No, I don't think. One, it's been some years since General Mr. Noriega, the fugitive, has been seen in the jungle, living in the jungle. He's used to a different kind of lifestyle, and I'm not quite sure he would be up to being chased around the countryside by Army Rangers, Special Forces, and light infantry units at the Joint Operations Training Center. But he might. I can't rule that out. But I think that's rather far-fetched.
General Powell, what assurance do you have that the PDF will accept the removal of Mr. Noriega and will be loyal to this new democratic government?
Well, time will tell, of course, but I believe that when the people of Panama, as well as to include the members of the PDF, realize that this reign of terror is over and that the sanctions have been lifted and that they have a government that was elected by the people of Panama, I hope that will cause all Panamanians who want to see their country prosper and who want democracy to realize that this is their government and to throw in with it. And that's what I'm hoping will happen.
Will we stay there until we're assured that the government is stable?
I'll stay there as long as the President desires armed forces of the United States to stay there.
The mission is not over until...
General Powell, can you explain to us why you were unable to apprehend Noriega? The White House said last night that the apprehension of Noriega was one of the objectives of this mission. Did you know his whereabouts before you launched this mission? It would seem that you would have. And how did he manage to escape our forces?
Michael, it's only 7 hours into the operation, so I'm not going to get into where we thought he was or wasn't or what we might be doing now. This operation is still young.
Can you give us some detail about how the deaths of the American personnel occurred?
I really don't. I don't have enough of the detail to get into something like that this early. It was as a result of firefights.
Where was the heaviest fighting?
There was heavy fighting down in the vicinity of the Comandancia. There was some fighting over on the western side as well at Rio Hato, and there was some contact in the vicinity of the Bridge of the America. There was contact throughout the entire area of operations, but I cannot give you who was killed or wounded where. It is just too early to get into that level of detail. I'm sorry. Get back, please.
Was the resistance by the PDF greater than you expected, less than you expected, and how do you characterize how well they have been fighting?
They resisted. We expected them to resist. They were, a number of them, quite loyal to General Noriega. They demonstrated that during the coup of 3 October. And so we were prepared for that and went down in sufficient force. So they did resist. They didn't resist for long because we put sufficient force in to control the situation. And for the most part, Organized resistance has ended, as the President mentioned a few moments ago, and what we're into now is mopping up and chasing down those who have broken out of the commandancia or escaped from Rio Hato and may be wandering around Panama with weapons and have not yet decided that it's time to give it up. So we're into stability operations now. For the most part, organized resistance is over.
Did any PDF units actually cooperate with U.S. forces in any fashion?
It's a little premature to say, to give you an answer to that. Let me just say that some fought hard and some didn't fight hardly at all.
Do you think the American public is ready to accept the loss of some lives in order to fulfill this mission?
Well, I think, as the President explained, that no president ever undertakes lightly the responsibility of making a decision to send U.S. military forces in harm's way. I think this President understands that as well as anybody, given his own track record in the United States Navy in World War II. It was a decision the President weighed very heavily before he made it. In the final analysis, it was his judgment and my judgment and that of his advisors that the importance of safeguarding American lives in Panama, especially after the events of last weekend, especially when it became clear that a new environment had been created in which members of the PDF felt free to fire on unarmed American soldiers, that the circumstances had changed radically enough so that this action was warranted.
General Powell, would we consider the operation over while Noriega is still large, or not?
Well, I think, as the General said, that the operation continues. We hope to wrap up General Noriega in the near future, but we are very confident at this point that we've achieved the bulk of our objectives in terms of supporting the restoration of a democratic government. We'll work with them to provide whatever security they need, whatever assistance they need.